Today, we're saddling up for an adventure into the life and times of one of the most iconic lawmen of the frontier, Wyatt Earp. Known for his steely gaze, quick draw, and unwavering commitment to justice, Wyatt Earp stands as a towering figure in the pantheon of Old West legends. Join me as we dust off the pages of history, don our Stetsons, and step into the boots of the man who became a living embodiment of the Wild West's grit and glory. This is the untold story of Wyatt Earp, legend of the Old West.
Wyatt Earp is the best known of all the frontier lawmen of the American West. Known for his soft-spoken demeanor paired with unwavering courage, he successfully navigated numerous gunfights, owing much of his survival to his exceptional patience and resolute nature. However, Earp's legacy extends beyond his fame as a lawman in Dodge City and Tombstone. He was also a buffalo hunter, miner, card dealer, stagecoach driver, saloon owner, and much more throughout the years. Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp was born to Nicholas Earp and Virginia Earp in Monmouth, Illinois, on March 19, 1848. His father was a lawman and a farmer who had formerly served in the Army. Remarkably, young Wyatt received his name from his father's former Army captain. At the time of Wyatt's birth, his older brothers, James and Virgil, were 7 and 5 years old, respectively. Additionally, he had an older sister named Martha, who was 3 years his senior. 2 years later, the Earp family relocated to Iowa, where Nicholas Earp established a farm. Soon, 3 more siblings would join the rapidly growing family: Morgan in 1851, Warren in 1855, and Adelia in 1861. Nicholas Earp always had high regard for the land and the law, imparting these values to his children. In 1864, the Earp family moved to Colton, California, near San Bernardino. Along the way, Wyatt was given his first weapon, a combination shotgun and rifle, to help protect the family against attacking Indians. Wyatt, even at a young age, exhibited a talent for marksmanship and quickly acquired a 6-gun, honing his skills through daily practice. When he arrived in California, he worked as a teamster and a railroad worker for a time. But soon, he began to work his way back east as a buffalo hunter, wagon train scout, and railroad hand. By 1870, Wyatt had made his way to Lamar, Missouri, where he fell in love and married Urilla Sutherland. Tragically, their time together was brief, as Urilla passed away within a year of their marriage. Historical records differ on the cause of her death, with some suggesting childbirth complications while others point to typhoid fever as the culprit. Heartbroken, Wyatt embarked on a journey to Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, where he found work as a buffalo hunter and stagecoach driver. However, trouble soon found him and his 2 fellow travelers as they faced accusations of horse theft. Wyatt managed to post bail and promptly fled to Kansas before the case could proceed to trial. In 1871, while in Kansas City, Earp crossed paths with legendary figures of the Wild West, including Wild Bill Hickok, Buffalo Bill Cody, Jack Gallagher, and Billy Dixon. Wyatt would later say of Wild Bill Hickok was regarded as the deadliest pistol shot alive and a man of great courage. The truth of certain stories of Bill's achievements may have been open to debate, but he had earned the respect paid to him. Wild Bill helped Wyatt become a better buffalo hunter, and it was during this time that Wyatt met Bat Masterson on the open Kansas prairie. The next significant chapter in Wyatt's life unfolded in August 1873, when he arrived in Ellsworth, Kansas. This marked the inception of the Earp legend. Ellsworth, a bustling railhead where massive cattle herds were driven north from Texas, teemed with rowdy and often inebriated cowboys. Among them were Billy and Ben Thompson, notorious gunmen who would rather resort to gunplay than talk out an argument. Wyatt had heard about the notorious Thompson brothers and wisely chose to avoid gambling with these unpredictable men. But before long, he caught up with them on August 15, 1873. As Wyatt stood across the street from Brennan's saloon, he heard the sounds of an argument coming from the gambling house. The Thompsons had engaged in a dispute with two other gamblers, John Sterling and Jack Morco, a local lawman. The altercation quickly attracted the attention of Sheriff Chauncey B. Whitney and his two deputies. In the midst of the confrontation, Sterling and Morco charged at the Thompsons, guns drawn. Ben Thompson managed to repel them with a barrage of gunfire. Billy Thompson, characterized by his violent tendencies and alcoholism, turned his weapon on Sheriff Whitney, a man who had been a friend to the Thompson brothers before this tragic event. At point-blank range, he shot the sheriff down. Wyatt observed the unfolding events without intervening, even as Ellsworth Mayor James Miller entered the saloon and demanded that Ben Thompson surrender his firearms. Thompson refused, prompting Miller to seek out Whitney's deputies, who had disappeared from the scene after the sheriff was shot. Stricken by disappointment when Wyatt noticed the two deputies cowering on the sidelines, he remarked to the passing Mayor Miller, "It's none of my business, but if it was me, I'd get me a gun and arrest Ben Thompson or kill him." Miller tore the badge off Deputy Norton's chest and, walking back to Earp, said, "I'll make it your business." Wyatt watched, stunned, as Ben Thompson swaggered out of the saloon and mounted his horse, as Brother Ben waved him goodbye. "What kind of a town is this?" he snapped at the deputies and mayor, who now stood meekly across the square. Borrowing a pair of six-shooters, Wyatt pursued Ben Thompson, who was about a block away. When he caught up with him, Wyatt demanded that Thompson throw down his gun. Thompson, aware of Wyatt's reputation, complied, and Wyatt escorted him to jail. Ben Thompson was subsequently fined $25 for disturbing the peace, while a murder warrant was issued for his brother Bill. Mayor Miller was so impressed with Wyatt's actions that he offered him the position of town marshal, with a monthly salary of $125. However, Wyatt declined the offer, returning the badge to Miller and expressing his intention to venture into the cattle business with his brothers. Ben Thompson, who would later turn lawman himself, would say to Bat Masterson in subsequent years that he had a powerful hunch that Wyatt would have killed him if he hadn't thrown down his gun. The tale of Wyatt standing up to Ben Thompson quickly circulated along the Chisholm Trail, and the Wyatt Earp legend was born. In the spring of 1874, Wyatt moved on to Wichita, Kansas, another vibrant Wild West town. In Wichita, he took on roles as a part-time lawman and city maintenance worker, earning approximately $60 per month. However, he was fired from the police force after fighting with William Smith, who was running for city marshal, against Mike Meager, a friend of Wyatt's. Furthermore, Wyatt was almost arrested himself for discharging his weapon in public. Though the incident was an accident, it didn't speak well of a lawman. When he was sitting in a local saloon with his feet up on a table, his pistol fell out of its holster and hit the floor, and the gun went off. While still in Wichita, there were reports that Wyatt and his brother James nearly faced arrest for vagrancy. Some reports say that Wyatt was involved in the misappropriation of city tax funds before hastily departing for Dodge City. With the aim of restoring law and order, the freshly appointed lawmen took their first step by establishing a deadline just north of the railroad yards on Front Street to maintain peace in the commercial district of the city. North of this demarcation, the city passed an ordinance that guns could not be worn or carried. However, on the south side of the deadline, those in favor of lawless continued their activities as usual, with a plethora of saloons, brothels, and frequent gunfights. The rule against carrying firearms was enforced round the clock, resulting in immediate imprisonment for anyone found armed. This led to a swift filling of Dodge City's jail. In his new capacity, Wyatt Earp set his sights on renowned train robber Dave Rudabaugh, following the outlaw's trail for 400 miles to Fort Griffin, Texas. Upon arrival, Wyatt's first stop was at Shancy's, the largest saloon in town, where he inquired about Rudabaugh. The establishment's owner, John Shancy, revealed that Rudabaugh had visited earlier in the week, but was unaware of his current whereabouts. Shancy directed Wyatt to Doc Holliday, who had engaged in card games with Rudabaugh. Wyatt harbored reservations about approaching Holliday, knowing that Doc had a strong dislike for lawmen. However, When Wyatt encountered Holiday that evening at Shancy's, he was pleasantly surprised by Doc's willingness to converse. Doc told Wyatt that he thought that Rudabaugh had backtrailed to Kansas. Wyatt promptly relayed this valuable information to Bat Masterson, the sheriff in Dodge City, and the news was instrumental in apprehending Rudabaugh. This unlikely encounter marked the beginning of a lasting friendship between Wyatt and Doc. In the autumn of 1876, Wyatt, along with his brother Morgan, temporarily departed Dodge City, embarking on a journey to the Black Hills near Deadwood, South Dakota, in pursuit of gold. Nevertheless, he returned to Dodge in May 1877, prompted by a message from James H. "Dog" Kelly, the newly elected mayor of Dodge City, who sought Wyatt's assistance in dealing with the Texas Cowboys wreaking havoc in the town. Upon his return, Wyatt assumed the role of the town marshal and deputized his brother Morgan. He vigorously advocated for stricter sentences through the courts, barred certain individuals from entering the town, and orchestrated a citizen committee to collaborate with law enforcement in maintaining order on the streets. Not long after Wyatt returned to Dodge, Doc Holliday turned up with Big Nose Kate. After committing a crime at Fort Griffin, Texas, Doc was running from a lynching party. At first, Doc hung out his doctor's shingle but soon went back to gambling, frequenting the Alhambra, and dealing cards at the Long Branch Saloon. Though Dodge City citizens thought the friendship between Wyatt and Doc was strange, Wyatt ignored them, and Doc kept the law while in Dodge City. While Doc was dealing faro in the Long Branch Saloon one night, several Texas cowboys arrived with a herd of cattle. After spending weeks on the trail, the rowdy cowboys were ready to let loose. Ed Morrison, whom Wyatt had previously embarrassed in Wichita, Kansas, and another man named Tobe Driscoll, led this unruly bunch. The cowboys descended upon the town, galloping down Front Street, guns blazing and blowing out shop windows. Upon entering the Long Branch Saloon, they began harassing the customers. When Wyatt entered the front door, he came face to face with several awaiting gun barrels. Stepping forward, Morrison sneered, "Pray and jerk your gun. Your time has come, Earp." However, a voice suddenly emerged from behind Morrison, interrupting the tense standoff. "No, friend, you draw." It was Doc, with his revolver pressed against Morrison's temple. Doc had been in the back room, his card game interrupted by the chaos outside. He continued with a chilling warning, "Any of you bastards pulls a gun, and your leader here loses what's left of his brains." The cowboys promptly dropped their weapons, and Wyatt rapped Morrison over the head with his long barrel Colt. Then, relieving Driscoll and Morrison of their arms, he ushered them to the Dodge City jail. Responding later, Wyatt said, "The only way anyone could have appreciated the feeling I had for Doc after the Driscoll Morrison business would have been to have stood in my boots when Doc came through the Long Branch doorway." During his time in Dodge City, Wyatt crossed paths with a saloon girl named Celia Ann Blalock, affectionately known as Mattie. Though the two never married, they lived as husband and wife. Initially, they were content, but their happiness was tested when Mattie developed a dependency on laudanum due to a prior illness, straining their bond. At that same time, Big Nose Kate and Doc Holliday engaged in a violent quarrel. Subsequently, Holliday saddled his horse and made his way to Colorado, leaving Big Nose Kate behind. An oft-mentioned incident took place in 1878 when Wyatt Earp and Clay Allison, a self-proclaimed gunman from New Mexico, squared off. According to the stories, Allison intended to protest the treatment of his men by the Dodge City marshals, and was willing to back his arguments with gun smoke. The Dodge City lawmen had gained a reputation for being hard on visiting cattle herders, with reports circulating about cattlemen being robbed, shot, and beaten with revolvers. George Hoyt, a former associate of Clay Allison, had met his demise while recklessly firing a pistol into the air on Dodge City streets. There are several versions of the story of the showdown. Some say that Allison and his men terrorized Dodge City, prompting Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson to flee in fear. Others suggest that Wyatt Earp coerced Allison into leaving. Still, some narratives propose that Allison departed Dodge City under the persuasion of a saloon owner and another cattleman, with little or no contact with Wyatt Earp. In any case, there is no evidence of any serious altercation ever having happened. Historians surmise that Allison might have come to Dodge City looking for trouble, but nothing happened. As Allison and his men made their rounds through the saloons, indulging in whiskey, Earp and his marshals quietly mobilized their forces. However, it was Dick McNulty, owner of a large cattle outfit, and Chalk Beeson, co-owner of the Long Branch Saloon, intervened on behalf of the town, talking the gang into giving up their guns. By 1879, Dodge City had been tamed, and Wyatt found himself spending more time at the gambling tables than in his role as a marshal. Therefore, when his brother Virgil informed him about the burgeoning town of Tombstone, Arizona, Wyatt, along with his brothers James and Morgan and common-law wife Mattie, made their way westward. Big Nose Kate would follow suit, and when Doc Holliday returned to Dodge City to find everyone gone, he too set his course for Arizona. Tombstone, Arizona. When Wyatt arrived in Tombstone in December of 1879, he planned to establish a stage line but soon discovered two were already in the town. Instead, he secured a gambling concession at the Oriental Saloon, entitling him to 0.25% of the profits. Additionally, he took on a role as a shotgun rider for Wells Fargo stagecoach shipments. James Earp established a saloon on Allen Street. Virgil Earp was already serving as deputy marshal of Tombstone, and Morgan Earp joined his brother as a fellow lawman. Doc Holliday, after reuniting with Big Nose Kate in Prescott, Arizona, eventually joined forces with the Earps in Tombstone. The town itself was notorious as one of the last remaining wide-open, lawless places, teeming with rustlers, thieves, gunmen, gamblers, and prostitutes. The Clanton Gang, a group of outlaws, had been reigning unchecked over the region and immediately resented the Earps' arrival. The Clanton Gang, led by Old Man Clanton and including his sons Ike, Finn, and Billy, along with the McClory brothers, Frank and Tom, Curly Bill Brocious, John Ringo, and their followers, lost no time in expressing their displeasure. The Clantons had long been rustling cattle from Old Mexico, moving their plunder northward to their ranch on the San Pedro River. Keeping Cochise County Sheriff John Behan on their payroll, their illegal operation had thrived until the Earps entered the scene. Wyatt wasn't spending all of his time working, as he met Josephine Josie Sarah Marcus while in Tombstone. The petite 18-year-old woman arrived in Tombstone with a traveling theater troupe in 1879 before Wyatt arrived. She hooked up with Sheriff John Behan and stayed in Tombstone. However, shortly after Wyatt appeared on the scene, Sheriff Behan made the mistake of introducing Josie to Wyatt, and the two instantly hit it off. The relationship between Wyatt and Mattie had continued to deteriorate as Mattie's laudanum dependency grew worse. Josie thought that Wyatt was the best-looking man in Tombstone, and she began to be seen with him almost every night at his faro table while Mattie lingered at home. Behan refused to accept Josie's apologies and fell in deeper with the Clantons to thwart the Earps at every turn. Now, holding a personal grudge, he vowed to help the rustlers rid Tombstone of the bothersome Earp brothers as soon as possible. So, when John Behan extended an offer in July 1880 for Wyatt to become a deputy sheriff under Chief Marshal Fred White, he was suspicious. He eventually concluded that the offer was a ploy to keep him occupied, preventing him from guarding the Wells Fargo stage, again allowing the Clantons access to this lucrative plunder. Ultimately, Wyatt accepted the position. However, Behan's scheme fell apart when Wyatt convinced Wells Fargo to hire his brother Morgan as the new guard, effectively thwarting the Clantons' access to the stagecoach plunder. Their plan having been a bust, the Clantons were furious. Curly Bill Brocious first tangled with Wyatt Earp in October 1880. On that day, Brocious, along with Billy Clanton and Frank and Tom McClory, were riding up and down Allen Street, indiscriminately discharging their firearms and harassing pedestrians. Sheriff White attempted to intervene, but Brocious drew his weapon. In the ensuing struggle, the gun discharged, striking White in the groin. Wyatt arrived on the scene and brought his 6-gun down on Curly Bill's head, knocking him unconscious. White was taken to the doctor, and Brocious was taken to jail. White, gravely wounded, made a statement on his deathbed, admitting to his own carelessness in the shooting. After White's death, Wyatt confronted the gunman, warning that he would kill anyone who reached for a weapon and ordered them to leave town. Soon, Curly Bill was released, thanks to White's dying statement. Meanwhile, Doc Holliday was engaged in gambling at the Oriental Saloon when John Behan accused him of manipulating a faro game. Doc, never one to shy away from confrontation, promptly challenged Behan, who hastily retreated. Behan's public embarrassment added more fuel to the fire. Through the early months of 1881, the Clantons persisted in cattle rustling from Mexico, a crime that the Earp lawmen could do nothing about. Their hands were tied as cattle rustling was officially a county matter, and John Behan held sway over the county. The gap between the law and the outlaw faction grew wider, dividing the town into two camps. While the majority of Tombstone's residents stood in support of the Earps, the politically influential outlaw element, with Behan at the helm, supported the Clantons. During this period, Doc and Big Nose Kate continued living together, but they had serious arguments when Kate got drunk. Her drunkenness often escalated to abuse, and finally Doc had had enough and threw her out. The Clantons capitalized on this separation. On March 15, 1881, 4 masked individuals attempted to rob a stagecoach near Contention, resulting in the death of both the stage driver and a passenger. The Cowboy faction immediately seized the opportunity and accused Doc Holliday of being one of the hold-up men. Sheriff Behan took charge of the investigation into the hold-up, found Kate on one of her drunken binges, where she continued to berate Doc for casting her out. After offering her more alcohol, Behan managed to persuade her to sign an affidavit implicating Doc as one of the masked bandits responsible for killing the stage driver. As Kate began to sober up, the Earps gathered witnesses who could confirm Doc's whereabouts on the night in question. When Kate realized what she had done, she retracted her statement, leading to the dismissal of charges against Doc. But for Doc, this was the last straw for Kate, and by giving her some money, he put her on a stage out of town. Simultaneously, Wyatt and his deputies launched a pursuit of the stagecoach robbers and arrested a man associated with the Clantons named Luther King. Under pressure, King confessed to participating in the crime. Yet following the arrest, John Behan contended that King was his prisoner, as the crime fell under territorial jurisdiction rather than city jurisdiction. Suspicion arose when King mysteriously escaped from Behan's custody. This turn of events made it apparent to Wyatt that Doc had been shanghaied as an intended sacrificial lamb, and King's release was orchestrated to shield the actual perpetrators behind the holdup. Events, a piece at a time, now moved rapidly toward a final showdown. Old Man Clanton was shot and killed by a band of vaqueros during a rustling attempt below the border. His eldest son, Ike, whose rushed judgments would prove fatal, took the family reins. Also, in the heat of summer 1881, a fire swept the business district of Tombstone, and the citizens blamed Marshal Ben Sippy for not controlling the looting that followed. Virgil Earp, the senior deputy, was appointed a marshal, a move that antagonized the already hostile Clantons. And, of course, there was Josie, who continued to see Wyatt. While she tried to remain apart from the bad blood churning between the factions, the sight of her riled Behan all over again. Throughout the lazy summer season of 1881, threats against the Earp brothers increased. Ike Clanton, Johnny Ringo, Curly Bill Brocious, and others of their ilk would often be heard telling a barroom full how they would send Wyatt Earp to Boot Hill. Gunfight at the OK Corral. On the morning of Tuesday, October 25, 1881, the day before the gunfight, Ike Clanton spent the day getting drunk, moving from one saloon to the next, and making threats against the Earps and Holliday to any who would listen. That night, he went to the Occidental Saloon for a card game with Tom McClory. An angry Doc Holliday, who had heard of the boasts, confronted him. "I heard you're going to kill me, Ike," he said. "Get out your gun and commence." Virgil, a U.S. deputy marshal, Wyatt, an appointed acting city marshal by Virgil, and Morgan, also a sworn officer, were present during this confrontation. Virgil told Doc and Ike that he would arrest both of them if they continued the argument. Though boasting violence throughout the day, Clanton was unarmed, and finally, Virgil drew Holiday away. But Clanton followed, promising to kill you tomorrow when the others come to town. Spotting Wyatt on the streets, the fired-up Clanton continued. "Tell your consumptive friend, your Arizona Nightingale, he's a dead man tomorrow." To which Wyatt just turned and replied, "Don't you tangle with Doc Holliday. He'll kill you before you've begun." Ike's parting shot was, "Get ready for a showdown." On the gloomy morning of Wednesday, October 26, 1881, the Earp, in anticipation of trouble, woke early. Virgil, positioned at his hotel window, observed the arrival of Billy Clanton in town, accompanied by his friend Billy Claiborne. They rendezvoused with the McClory brothers and Ike Clanton on Allen Street. Ike was actively seeking Doc Holliday, but before he could find him, Virgil and Morgan intervened. Ike, bracing a shotgun, engaged in a verbal exchange with the two brothers. However, when Clanton raised his rifle menacingly, Virgil took control of the situation, confiscated his rifle, and brought him before Justice of the Peace Wallace. There, Ike was fined $27.50 for carrying firearms within the city limits. Meanwhile, Wyatt and Tom McClory, both hearing what had happened, met at the judge's door simultaneously, literally bumping into each other. Although Wyatt offered an apology, McClory responded with insults, prompting Wyatt brought his gun down on McClory's head. Later that morning, the Cowboys met at Spangenberg's, a gunsmith shop. Frank McClory then recklessly rode his horse onto the boardwalk, causing pedestrians to scatter in alarm. Wyatt grabbed the horse's reins, leading it to the streets while McClory yelled profanities. After this latest confrontation, the outlaws retreated as a group around the corner off Allen Street. With all of the tension, there was bound to be a fight. Several members of the town's Citizens Committee offered their assistance to the Earp brothers, but Wyatt declined, asserting that it was their responsibility as law officers. It was at this juncture that John Behan, the county sheriff, appeared pronouncing, "Ike Clanton and his crew are on Fremont Street talking gun talk." They were specifically plotting an ambush on Doc Holliday, who typically passed through that area each morning. Virgil, holding the position of deputy marshal, agreed to head down to disband them, but insisted that Behan should accompany him. However, Behan responded with dismissive laughter, stating, "Hell, this is your fight, not mine." However, the Cowboys were surprised when the Earps showed up, and Doc was with them. As they made their way to the OK Corral, witnesses said that the three Earp brothers were all dressed in black with firm, mean grimaces on their faces, while Doc was nattily clad in gray and was whistling. Where the two forces finally met was 90 yards down an alley from the OK Corral. The actual gunfight took place off Fremont Street between Fly's Photo Gallery and Jersey's Livery Stable. The Earps passed by the OK Corral but cut through the alley, where they found the troublemakers waiting at the other end. "You are under arrest for attempting to disturb the peace," Virgil announced. As the senior officer, he displayed only a non-threatening walking stick, giving Doc his shotgun to carry. The rustlers tightened, and Morgan and Doc simultaneously braced for action. "Hold on, I don't want that," cried Virgil. What happened next was a blur, occurring in about 30 seconds. The shooting started when Billy Clanton and Frank McClory cocked their pistols. It is unknown who fired the first shot, but Doc Holliday's bullet was the first to hit home, piercing through Frank McClory's abdomen and causing McClory's shot to miss, instead grazing Wyatt's coat tail. Simultaneously, Billy Clanton fired at Virgil, but his shot also went astray when he was hit with Morgan's shot through his rib cage. Billy Claiborne swiftly fled as soon as the gunfire erupted, vanishing from sight. Ike Clanton, gripped by panic, discarded his firearm and pleaded for his life. "Fight or get out like Claiborne," Wyatt yelled, and watched Ike desert his brother Billy as he ran towards the door of the photography shop. But Ike then withdrew a hidden gun, firing one more round toward Wyatt before disappearing. The sound of Ike's shot momentarily distracted Morgan, allowing Tom McClory to fire a round into Morgan's shoulder. Doc instantly countered, blowing Tom away with blasts from both barrels of his shotgun. Mortally wounded and in his final moments, Billy Clanton blindly discharged his firearm into the enveloping gun smoke, striking Virgil's leg. Wyatt responded by sending several rounds into Billy. Following the intense firefight, an eerie silence settled over the scene as the townspeople emerged from their homes and businesses. Wagons were summoned to transport the injured Morgan and Virgil to their respective homes, accompanied by attending physicians. The 30-second shootout claimed the lives of Billy Clanton, Frank McClory, and Tom McClory. Virgil sustained a gunshot wound to the leg, while Morgan suffered a shoulder injury. As Wyatt stood still stunned, Sheriff Behan appeared, advising him he was under arrest. Subsequently, the Earps and Doc Holliday faced murder charges, but it was ultimately determined that their actions fell within the bounds of the law. Virgil was later terminated as marshal for his role in the homicides. Cowboy's revenge. Virgil was ambushed on December 28th while walking between saloons on Allen Street and Tombstone, and he was maimed by a shotgun blast that struck his left arm and shoulder. Ike Clanton's hat was found in the back of the building across Allen Street from where the shots were fired. On March 18, 1882, the Cowboy gang struck again while Morgan Earp played pool at Campbell and Hatch's saloon. A shot was fired from the darkness of the alley, striking Morgan in the back. Morgan's body was dressed in one of Doc Holliday's suits and shipped to the parents in Colton, California for burial. Earp Vendetta ride. Earp was driven by a desire for retribution against those who wounded Virgil and took Morgan's life. His quest for justice began with the killing of Stillwell, serving as the initial step in his pursuit of vengeance. The entire Earp party, including Matty, accompanied Morgan's body. However, in Tucson, Wyatt, Warren, and Doc Holliday hopped off the train searching for Frank Stillwell, who supposedly worked in the railroad yards. The train went on to California without them. After spotting Stillwell, Wyatt chased him down the track, filling him with bullet holes. A coroner's jury named Wyatt and Warren Earp, Doc Holliday, and two other men named Texas Jack Johnson and Sherman McMasters as those men who had killed Stillwell, and warrants were issued for their arrest. Collaborating with Doc Holliday and a group of allies, Wyatt began what is known as the Earp Vendetta Ride. Wyatt received information that Pete Spence was located at his timber camp in the Dragoons. Afterwards, Wyatt and his men swiftly set out, but they did not find Pete Spence. Instead, they encountered Florentino Cruz, who, in a state of fear, disclosed the identities of all those involved in Morgan's murder, including himself. Earp and his men filled Cruz with bullet holes. The Earp posse set out once more, and on March 24, 1882, crossed paths with Curly Bill Brocious and 8 of his men near Iron Springs. A fierce gunfight ensued, resulting in the death of Curly Bill and a mortal wound for Johnny Barnes. In just over a year, the Earp posse, alongside Doc Holliday, exacted retribution against a long list of individuals, including Indian Charlie, Dixie Gray, Florentino Cruz, Johnny Barnes, Jim Crane, Harry Head, Bill Leonard, Joe Hill, Luther King, Charlie Snow, Billy Lang, Zwing Hunt, Billy Grounds, and Hank Swilling. Pete Spence turned himself into the authorities, where he could hide in the penitentiary. In May 1882, Wyatt and Doc departed Tombstone, vowing never to return but maintaining their commitment to seek vengeance on Ringo, Clanton, Spence, and Swilling if they ever located them. Life after Tombstone. They arrived in Silver City, New Mexico, and boarded a train for Colorado. Josie subsequently joined Wyatt in Denver, where the two were married. Though Maddie had traveled with the Earps to California to Wyatt's parents' home at some point, she left them and ended up in Globe, Arizona, where she lived a life of prostitution. She confided in her friends that her husband had ruined her life when he deserted her. Tragically, Maddie's life came to a sorrowful end due to a laudanum overdose on July 3, 1888, in Pinal City, Arizona. During their time in Colorado, Wyatt initially worked as a private investigator and a Wells Fargo driver. He and Josie also occasionally prospected in the mountains. On occasion, they received visits from Bat Masterson, and the pair would see Doc Holliday, who had settled down in Leadville, Colorado, when they could. Wyatt and Josie returned to Dodge City, Kansas in 1883 for a time, and then he took his new bride on a tour of Texas and northern Mexico before they made their way to California. In the meantime, Doc Holliday's health was badly deteriorating, and he soon migrated from Leadville to Denver in the winter of 1885. Though he did not improve in Denver, he could see his old friend, Wyatt Earp, in the late winter of 1886 when they met in the lobby of the Windsor Hotel. Sadie Marcus described the skeletal Holliday as having a continuous cough and standing on unsteady legs. Holliday's health continued to get worse. As a realist, Doc was not one to believe in miraculous cures, but hoping that the Yampa hot springs and sulfur vapors might improve his health, he headed for Glenwood Springs, Colorado, in May 1887. Registering at the fashionable Hotel Glenwood, he grew steadily worse, spending his last 57 days in bed at the hotel and was delirious 14 of them. On November 8, 1887, Doc awoke clear-eyed and asked for a glass of whiskey. It was given to him, and he drank it down with enjoyment. Then, looking down at his bare feet, he said, "This is funny," and died. He always figured he would be killed with his boots on. After spending several years in California, Wyatt and Josie spent time with the Earps in San Bernardino and Josie's family in San Francisco. While in California, Wyatt acted as a referee in boxing matches, continued to gamble, and invested in real estate, saloons, and a racehorse. In 1897, the gold fever broke in Alaska, and the couple headed to Nome, where they opened a saloon during the height of the gold rush. The pair also panned for their gold throughout the Yukon and did very well. They returned to California in 1901 with an estimated $80,000. However, their stay was short-lived when they heard about the gold strike in Tonopah, Nevada. Taking up prospecting in earnest, Wyatt staked several claims in the Mojave Desert, where he discovered several veins of gold. Near Vidal, California, he also stumbled upon valuable copper deposits, prompting him and his wife to spend their winters in a modest cottage in the area. During the summers in Los Angeles, Wyatt forged friendships with early Hollywood actors and even served as an advisor for various Hollywood westerns during the era of silent films. Wyatt Earp was the last surviving Earp brother and the last surviving participant of the gunfight at the OK Corral, when he died at home in the Earp's small rented bungalow at 4004 West 17th Street in Los Angeles, of prostate cancer on January 13, 1929, at the age of 80. Among those who paid their respects as pallbearers at his funeral were renowned cowboy actors Tom Mix and William S. Hart. Wyatt's cremated ashes were buried in Josie's family plot in Colma, California, just south of San Francisco. Josie, upon her death in 1944, was interred beside him.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.